Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are setting out on a journey, one that I promise will fundamentally change the way you see the world around you. I mean it. We're about to learn a whole new language, a silent one, that's written on every single branch, leaf, and root of these amazing storytellers we see every day, but maybe don't really see. Trees. So, just for a moment, forget thinking of a forest as just a big green blur on a hill. We're going to take that view, break it down, and build it back up from scratch. By the end of this, you won't see trees as just things. You'll see them as living, breathing archives, each one telling its own incredible story of struggle, survival, and success. You'll literally walk outside, and the world will start speaking to you in a way it never has before.
This quote right here, this is it. This is the heart of everything we're talking about today. From Tristan Gooley's incredible book, let's really chew on that for a second. Trees are keen to tell us so much. That's not a passive statement. It suggests they're eager to share, that they're just bursting with information. But then comes the catch, the really important part. But only to those who know how to read it. That right there is our mission. The information isn't locked away in a vault. It's right out in the open. But you need the key. And that key is a special kind of attention, a new way of looking. It means most of us, most of the time, are walking around basically deaf and blind to this constant flood of stories. Today, we're forging that key.
So here's our game plan. We've broken this journey down into 5 main parts, and each one builds on the last. First, we're going to lay the foundation and explore the secret language of trees, just figuring out what it means to go from just looking to actually reading. Then, we'll become map makers in how trees map landscapes, seeing how the big tree families literally paint a map of the environment for us. After that, we zoom in, and we become biographers as we learn to read a tree's life story, right there in its branches and bark. From there, we dig down into the world beneath the branches to understand the hidden, secret half of the tree. And finally, we'll get to a new way of seeing, where we'll talk about the huge shift that happens in your brain once you learn this language. So, let's get into it.
Okay, let's begin. Right here, at the start of this whole new way of seeing things. And look, this first part isn't going to be about memorizing a bunch of complicated Latin names or dry facts. That's not the point. This is about a fundamental rewiring of how you observe the world. We're making the leap from just passively glancing at a tree to actively, consciously reading it. You know, it's the difference between hearing a bunch of noise and actually understanding a language, with all its grammar and nuance. The goal here is to find these incredible stories that are hidden in plain sight, not in some faraway jungle, but in the park down the street, or even in that one single tree outside your window.
So what does it actually mean to read a tree? Well, this is it. This is our core definition. It's really an art, but it's an art that's built on a foundation of science. It means we're moving past just simple identification, saying, oh, that's an oak tree. We're going so much deeper. It's about starting to ask a chain of questions. Why is that oak leaning so hard to the east? Why are all of its lowest branches dead and snapped off? Why aren't there any other oaks growing anywhere near it? Every single thing you can see is a clue. The color of its leaves can tell you about the soil's moisture. The overall shape of its crown tells you about its lifelong fight for sunlight against its neighbors. The little scars on its bark might tell you about a deer that rubbed its antlers there 5 years ago, or maybe even a lightning strike from a decade back. We're learning to see all these things, form, color, shape, patterns, as the words and sentences in a much bigger story.
This right here, this really shows the 2 different worlds we can live in. On the left, you've got the default setting, right? A tree is just a tree. It's nice scenery, part of the green background. It's a pleasant view, but honestly, it's a little bit shallow. But on the right, that's the world we're stepping into right now. To the trained eye, that exact same tree isn't just a tree anymore. It's a multi-tool. It's a compass. The branches can point you south. It's a map. The type of tree tells you about the soil. It's a weather station. The condition of its leaves can give you clues about recent weather. And it's a history book, with every scar and ring telling a story. As the source author says, once you learn to see these things, you can't unsee them. And that's the best part. It turns any walk, even a short one, into this fascinating, ongoing investigation.
All right, we've laid the groundwork. Now it's time to get our hands dirty with our first major practical lesson. And honestly, this might be the single most powerful tool you pick up today for reading a whole landscape in just a glance.
We're going to learn how the two great ancient families of trees literally draw a living map of the world right in front of our eyes. Understanding this one fundamental division, this rivalry that's been going on for millions of years, is the absolute key to unlocking the broad patterns you see everywhere, from a massive mountain range all the way down to a little city park. Once you see this, you will see it everywhere.
This comparison right here is everything. Let's really dig into it. The first trees on the scene, evolutionarily speaking, were the gymnosperms. This group includes our conifers. They're the ancient tough guys. Then, much later, the angiosperms, the flowering plants, came along and just took over the world. This group includes almost all the broadleaf trees we know. But for us, the really crucial difference is simple. Conifers are tougher. They're the specialists of harsh places. Their needles are brilliantly designed to save water so they can handle dry, sandy, rocky soil. And, as we're about to see, they're way better at handling the cold. Broadleaves, on the other hand, with their big, wide solar panel leaves, are just gluttons for sunlight and water. They need nicer conditions, moister, richer soil to really thrive. And this one difference creates a visible map. Because conifer needles have waxy coatings and they're packed so tight, they look like a dark, deep green from a distance. Broadleaves are usually a brighter, paler green. So next time you look at a hillside and see a huge patch of dark green with a pale green ribbon snaking through a valley, you're not just seeing colors anymore, you're reading a map that says, hey, there's a river down here, making the soil rich and wet enough for the picky broadleaves, while the tough conifers stick to the harder, drier slopes.
So you're probably wondering, okay, but why? What makes them so much tougher? It's a fantastic question, and the answer is just a beautiful piece of natural engineering. It all comes down to a tree's internal plumbing. See, every tree has this incredible challenge. It has to pull water all the way from its roots, sometimes hundreds of feet up into the air, to its leaves. It does this through a process called transpiration. Basically, as water evaporates from the leaves, it creates this powerful suction that pulls columns of sap all the way up the trunk. Imagine millions of tiny straws all sucking at once. It's an amazing system, but it has one catastrophic weakness: freezing temperatures. The real problem isn't the freezing itself, it's what happens when things thaw out. That process can create tiny air bubbles in the tree's water pipes. These bubbles are called cavitations, and they are deadly. It's just like getting an air bubble in a syringe or a fuel line in your car. It breaks the suction, creates an embolism, and the flow of sap just stops. And this is where that ancient split between the two tree families becomes a life-or-death situation. Broadleaf trees evolved these wide, open pipes. Think of them like giant water mains. They're super efficient in the summer, moving tons of sap, but they're extremely vulnerable to these killer air bubbles. One bubble can shut down a whole pipe. Conifers, on the other hand, use these much narrower, more primitive pipes called tracheids. Think of them as a bundle of tiny little straws. They're not as efficient, but they are way more resilient. The tiny bubbles that form in these narrow pipes can't get very big, and they can often just dissolve back into the water, keeping the system running. This is exactly why, when you go up a mountain, you hit a tree line where all the broadleaves just disappear, and it's only conifers. You're seeing the precise altitude where the risk of those bubbles becomes too much for the broadleaf's high-risk, high-reward plumbing. Now, of course, nature loves an exception. A few brilliant broadleaves, like birch and maple, figuring out a workaround. In the spring, they generate pressure from their roots to actively push sap upward, flushing out any bubbles from the winter. And it's that unique ability that lets them survive much farther north than their cousins. And it's that same pressurized sugary sap that gives us maple syrup.
So besides the big temperature difference, here are the other forces that add detail to our tree map. Water is huge. You'll see conifers all over dry, sandy hills, while that fat ribbon of paler broadleaf trees will perfectly trace the path of a river. Soil nutrients are another layer. The author found walnut trees in Spain that only grew in one little dip in the landscape, a natural bowl where rich soil had collected. Just a few feet away, the soil was too poor. Light creates these incredible patterns of competition we'll talk about next. And then there's human influence, which is usually the easiest one to spot. Nature doesn't really do straight lines, so if you see a perfect line of trees, it's a sign that people have been there. Finally, you have the coast. The salty air is brutal, and it creates this zone where only a few super tough specialists, like sycamores, can survive. The battle for sunlight creates its own kind of map, a story that plays out over decades. And it really is the classic fable of the hare and the tortoise. The light-loving pioneers, they're the hares. Trees like birch and pine are total opportunists.
When a piece of land opens up from a fire or a storm, they move in, growing incredibly fast, soaking up all that direct sun. They live fast and die relatively young. But underneath their branches, the tortoises are just biding their time. Shade-tolerant trees like beech and yew are masters of patience. They can grow, slowly but surely, in the deep shade cast by the pioneers. For years, even decades, they just wait. And then eventually, they push their way up through the canopy. And at that point, the game is over. The beech is now the tallest, casting its own deep shade, and the pioneers below, starved of the sunlight they need, they just fade away. The tortoise wins. The slow-motion battle is happening in every single forest.
Okay, so we've been looking at the big picture, the whole landscape. Now, we're going to zoom all the way in to the intimate story of one single tree. If the species of tree tells us about the land, the shape of an individual tree tells its own personal life story. Every single twist in its trunk, every broken branch, every lean, every scar, it's a chapter in its autobiography. It's a detailed logbook of its fight for light and water, its battles with wind, and its neighbors. We're about to learn how to read that story.
To really get the fundamental problem a tree faces, the source gives us this perfect analogy. Imagine you and a friend are in a competition. You have 15 minutes and a pile of bricks. Whoever builds the tallest tower wins a big prize. But if your tower falls over at any point, you lose immediately. So what do? Do you play it safe, build the short, stable tower, and just hope your friend doesn't build one that's one brick taller? Or do you take a risk, go for that extra height, knowing your tower is getting more and more unstable, risking it all for that big prize? This is exactly the strategic game that trees are playing their entire lives. Growing tall is incredibly expensive and risky, but the prize for winning is everything. It's clear, unimpeded sunlight. Some trees, like beeches, are the risk takers. They push just that little bit higher. But then you have other trees that just opt out of the race entirely, like hazel, which is perfectly happy to grow in the deep shade of an oak. It's found a different way to win.
So why do conifers tend to be all pointy and broadleaves all round? This analogy is just fantastic. It all comes down to a thing called apical dominance. The apical bud is the main growing tip, right at the very top of the tree. Think of it as the CEO, the boss. This boss produces a hormone called auxin that flows down the trunk. In conifers, the boss is a total micromanager. It sends a powerful, constant chemical signal down to all the side branches that says, "Don't you dare grow out. All energy goes up." And that creates that classic, pointy Christmas tree shape. But in most broadleaves, like an oak, the boss is way more chill. The signal is much weaker. It's less of a command and more of a friendly suggestion. This gives the lower branches way more freedom to spread out to the sides to find light. So when you see a pointy pine next to a round oak, you're literally seeing two different corporate management styles.
Okay, I'm about to tell you something that is so crucial, and it's something a lot of people get wrong. It might even break your brain a little bit. Ready? A tree's branches do not move up as the tree gets taller. If you carve your initials into a tree trunk at eye level, they will still be at eye level 50 years from now. A branch's position is fixed for life. A tree only grows from its tips. The very top grows up, and the very ends of the branches grow out. Understanding this one simple fact is the absolute key to everything, because it explains why trees self-prune. As the tree gets taller, the new branches up top start to shade out the old ones down below. Those lower branches can't make food anymore, so they become a drain on energy. The tree, being super efficient, just cuts them off, seals the wound, and lets the old branch die and fall away.
This whole process of self-pruning leaves behind one of the most beautiful and useful clues in the forest. So, in the northern hemisphere, where's the sun all day? It's in the southern sky. So a tree, trying to get as much light as possible, will naturally grow more branches on its southern side. Well, if it grows more branches on that side, it also sheds more branches on that side as it gets taller. And every time a branch falls off, it leaves a scar, a mark that often heals over into a shape that looks just like an eye, sometimes with a little ridge of bark over it like an eyebrow. Because there are more of these on the southern side, you get this collection of southern eyes all looking out from the south face of the trunk. It's a built-in compass. The author tells this great story about feeling like he was being watched in the woods one day, and he looked up and realized the trees were literally staring at him.
Okay,
So far, we've focused on everything we can see above ground, but now our investigation is going to take us underground. It's so easy to forget this, but what we see of a tree, that's only half the story. The root system is a sprawling, hidden world, and it's just as big and complex as the branches we see. And those roots, they tell their own story about the tree's strategy, its search for water, and its constant battle with gravity and the soil itself. The clues are right there, if you know how to look.
You might think roots are just a messy, random tangle down there, but they're not. They're following a genetic blueprint. And there are basically 4 main strategies. First, you have the plate system. Think of the base of a wine glass. It's super wide but really shallow. You see this in beeches and spruces. It's why they tend to get blown over in big storms, pulling up that huge, flat pancake of earth. Then there's the sinker system, where a tree has that wide plate but also sends down a few deep, vertical roots for extra stability. Some oaks do this. The heart system is a compromise, with roots going both wide and pretty deep. And finally, you have the taproot. This is one deep, powerful anchor that just drills straight down, looking for water. You see this in pines and walnuts. It's a perfect strategy for dry climates.
Now here's a question for you. Can your footsteps, just you walking around, actually kill a giant, ancient tree? It sounds like a crazy exaggeration, but the answer is yes, 100% yes. The source tells this powerful story about a huge, beautiful oak tree. People loved this tree, and they would walk right up to a little sign at its base. Over years and years, their footsteps wore a path in the dirt, a desire path. That constant traffic compacted the soil until it was hard as a rock, and it crushed and suffocated all the tiny, delicate feeder roots on that one side of the tree. The result wasn't instant, but it was deadly. The massive branch directly above those now dead roots, starved of water, started to die, and one day it just broke off and crashed to the ground. The damage way up in the sky was a perfect mirror of the invisible damage that had been done to the roots below.
If you want to see some truly genius-level engineering, just look at how a tree anchors itself on a steep slope. It's incredible. To fight against the constant pull of gravity, it grows a totally lopsided root system. The book uses this perfect analogy. Imagine you need to stop a heavy barrel from rolling down a hill. What do? On the downhill side, you'd shove short, thick blocks of wood underneath it to prop it up, right? That's a compression force. And on the uphill side, you tie a long rope to it and anchor it further up the hill, pulling on it to hold it in place. That's a tension force. Well, trees do that exact same thing with their roots. The downhill roots grow short and fat, acting like props. The uphill roots grow long and thin, spreading far up the hill, acting like tension cables. It's just a stunning example of form perfectly following function.
And here we are. We've reached the final, and I think the most profound, stage of our journey. We've gathered all these tools, we've learned the grammar of the secret language, and now we get the reward, the payoff. In the old hero's journey myths, they'd call this the elixir. It's not a magic potion, it's something way better and way more permanent. It's an upgrade to your perception. The world is about to feel richer, more detailed, more alive. A simple walk will never be the same, because you won't just see a tree, you'll see its history, its strategy, and its story.
So why does learning this stuff feel so good? Why does it become almost addictive? This quote from the economist George Lowenstein just nails it. For a long time, people thought curiosity just came from being ignorant. You don't know something, so you want to know it. But his theory was way more clever. Total, complete ignorance, that doesn't usually make us curious. If you know absolutely nothing about a super complex topic, you probably aren't bursting with questions. No, curiosity gets ignited when you know just enough to realize there's a specific piece of information that you're missing. It's the feeling of a puzzle with a piece missing. It creates an intellectual itch that your brain feels compelled to scratch.
This is why learning to read trees is so much fun and just keeps going. Every new clue you learn doesn't just give you an answer, it opens up brand new questions. So when you learn that trees on a slope grow lopsided roots, you filled one information gap. But that knowledge immediately creates a new gap. The very next time you see a tree on the hill, your brain will have that itch. I wonder if its roots are doing that. Let me look closer. You're now primed to see, not just look. The author tells a great story about this. He was in a small wood on a hilltop and noticed something new. He knew roots grew to fight the wind, but he saw that at the very edge of the woods, all the roots pointed outwards, away from the center. And boom, a new gap was filled. The edge of a wood is always windier than the sheltered middle.
This is the engine of curiosity we've kickstarted today. Every answer just lights the fuse for 10 more questions.
So there you have it. We've given you the language, we've handed you the decoder ring. The world right outside your door is suddenly packed with stories that just a little while ago were completely invisible. You now have the power to see the compass in the southern eyes, to read the map of dark conifers and pale broadleaves, to see the history of a fight in a forked trunk, and to understand the life and death engineering in the roots. The knowledge is yours now. The final, most important step? Well, that's all on you. Go outside, take a walk, and start reading.